So my name is Colleen and I am General Manager of the Nuclear Insurance Association of Canada, otherwise known as NIAC. As a matter of fact, more commonly known as NIAC. And it's my pleasure to provide to you some background to set up the stage for the other speakers who are speaking with us today. Prior to that, I just wanted to point out 2 or 3 people in the room. Carlotta Bowen from Aon is with us, and also Zelma from Willis, who are insurance brokers. And also Mr. Steve Beswick and Mr. Leonard Hillier from the Marsh offices here in Toronto are also with us as well. That's part of our group from the insurance side of things. These are, yes, she flew all the way in from Calgary just to be here. So that's great that we have such excellent representation. Next slide, please. So before I get into our actual presentation, I just want to share with you some information about NIAC. Basically, what is it that NIAC does? We specialize in high-quality insurance risk management, underwriting, and inspections for Canadian nuclear exposures. And we provide true risk transfer. We provide secure insurance capacity, and we collaborate with the world's nuclear experts to create innovative domestic solutions for our clients and members. Next slide, please. And who do we serve? Well, the benefit of our experience works for all of our stakeholders. Our insured clients, the members of the general insurance companies who insure your home and autos, multi-level government agencies, and all Canadians, as a matter of fact. NIAC has a history of 55 years of partnering with insurers from around the globe to create reliable risk management for the nuclear industry. And what do we stand for? We offer Canadian risk solutions, thought leadership, and the expertise that provides security and confidence to all of our members and to our customers. We lead the domestic nuclear industry in areas of nuclear insurance law, good governance, and also claims administration. We collaborate with the world's leading experts to create a center of excellence. We like to say that we bring the complex world of insurance to the complex world of nuclear. Because they are both complex, believe me. Now let's talk about international nuclear liability conventions. This is the basis under which we create the environment that we can insure these risks. Since the commercialization of nuclear power in the late 1950s, the international community have developed special regimes to deal with nuclear liability because of the catastrophic potential of this power source. There are several reasons for needing a special regime for nuclear, and I am sure that as suppliers to the nuclear industry, most of you are well aware of the many layers of safety, policy, procedures that accompany this line of business, and that does not exist in other commercial areas. Nuclear liability insurance shares that similarity. It's complex. There's lots of regulation, etc. So there are 3 conventions that deal with nuclear liability. There's actually more, but I'm trying to keep it simple. It's like an onion. The more you take off a layer, there's a more complex layer underneath. And it would make you cry. There is the Paris Convention, which was established in the early 1960s, and it was revised in 2004. This regime generally governs Western European countries. Then we have also what's called the Vienna Convention. Similarly, it was developed in the 60s, around the same time as Paris. However, other countries, other than Western European countries, have joined this convention. Canada is not a part to either of these conventions. However, our domestic nuclear liability legislation follows the common principles that are contained within these conventions. And for this reason, Canada will be able to join a convention that has been more recently developed. This is the Convention on Supplementary Compensation. We call it the CSC for short, and that was developed in the late 1990s and has recently come into force earlier this year. The U.S. joined this convention, and Canada will ratify this convention upon entry into force of the new Nuclear Liability and Compensation Act. This act recently passed earlier this year. It's in the process of being implemented, and we anticipate that it will be implemented, come into force early in 2016. Next slide. So what are the principles that are contained in these conventions? There are 7 basic principles. I've actually combined the last 2 and put them on so that they fit 3 and 3, so it's easier. And this creates an environment for the commercialization of this technology. These are the principles. Exclusive liability. This means that only the operator of a nuclear installation may be found liable for a nuclear incident. Furthermore, the operator is absolutely liable, meaning that the operator cannot in any way get out of the responsibility for this incident. He cannot contract out of the statute, nor can he pass it along to suppliers, contractors, or the designers of nuclear power stations. The saying, "the buck stops here," really does apply here. It is these 2 principles that is referred to as the channeling of liability of the operator. So when you hear people talking about the channeling, that is what we're referring to, the absolute and exclusive liability of the operator. It is limited in time. The principle provides a time frame under which a victim may bring an action against the operator. Currently in Canada, that limit is 10 years. And under our new regime, which I alluded to earlier, that time limit will increase to 30 years. The other principles is limited in amount. This principle indicates that there is a ceiling on the amount of liability that an operator would be responsible for. Again, in Canada, that limit is $75 million, which will increase in the coming years to $1 billion under the new regime. Another principle is financial protection. Under the conventions, it is mandatory that the operators either purchase insurance to cover their nuclear liability exposure, which has been imposed upon them, or to provide some other alternate financial security to provide the nuclear liability exposure. This is where the nuclear insurance pooling system becomes involved. There are a number of nuclear insurance pools around the world in most jurisdictions that provide commercial nuclear power for peaceful purposes. Mr. Mark Popplewell, who will be speaking in a little while later, he will elaborate a little more with respect to the pooling system. The pools were developed to respond to government request for a joint insurer-government solution for the fostering of this fledgling industry just after the Second World War. This was an enormous undertaking. This is unprecedented collaboration between private sector and public sector to develop this type of organization. The remaining 2 principles, jurisdiction and non-discrimination, deal with the jurisdiction that takes responsibility if an incident were to occur. This is very critical, especially in Western European countries where there are several countries in a very small space. The accident state becomes a state that deals with a situation. Cut and dried is very clear. Non-discrimination, this principle refers to the fact that there will be many people from many other countries. Again, when you think of Western Europe, there are people from all these different countries, and this principle provides fairness to all victims, regardless of where they are, where they're from, or what country they're from, or everything else. It just says that we're all going to be treated the same here. So those are important principles as well. Last slide. So in conclusion, Again, I'm just setting up that these are the principles that were developed to guide and to create what I like to say, create a box so that insurers can look at this box and say, you know what, we can get our heads around this. If we didn't have most of these principles, then for one reason or another that I believe you could, quite readily come to the conclusion that, without some of these principles or portions of these principles, it becomes very, very difficult, if not impossible, for the insurers to be able to insure the risk. So I think I've already given my conclusion. These principles work together to create a regime that insurers and governments, by working together, can provide the required financial protection required. Whether there's ever incident or not, that is not the issue. The issue is what we have an inherently dangerous situation, and it's incumbent on us to ensure that there is proper financial protection. So although all the principles are important, it's the channeling of the liability, the exclusive and absolute liability provisions that insurers are able to provide the required insurance that is required. Thank you. If you have okay.